Hey guys, it's Tori. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I thought that would be a good idea. Basically, I'm going to be talking about my mental health journey. I have had a lot of ups and lots of really low downs. I don't know how to explain my mental health without explaining my childhood to like an extent. I don't want to give like personal details or anything about what I've gone through or anything like that, just because I don't want to make anybody look bad or give anybody the wrong impression about someone in my life. I guess we'll just start when I can first remember I had depression or felt really sad. And I just want to kind of explain something before I talk about this, like my mental health journey in general. So first of all, there is like it's kind of hard to explain. With mental health, it can be like chemical or environmental or a mixture of both. For a lot of this, I think a lot of it was environmental, but I also think that it's chemical, and I'll explain why. When I was 9, my parents were getting a divorce and my dad was getting out of the military, and it's kind of hard to explain my life because I've had so many different changes in my life. But basically, I'll explain it this way. My mom had 2 kids before she married my dad, and then my parents had 2 kids, which was me and my little brothers. Then I have a half sister and a half brother, which I don't care that they're half, they're my sister and brother. My dad took them on as their own kids. But when my parents divorced, my dad never adopted my siblings, so they had to stay. But my dad decided to move to Kansas with me and my brother. We moved away, and I didn't really get to see my mom. I saw her maybe once until like several years later, and then I finally got to see her again. But I wasn't allowed to talk to her on the phone. I wasn't allowed to talk to my siblings. My brother was in and out of prison at the time. My sister was in foster care. My mom is not doing good, and I'm learning a lot about like what my mom is going through now. So now like it makes sense to me about like my parents and their mental health and like why I might be the way that I am. I think that a lot of it is biological and chemical because it was passed down from generation to generation to me. The first time I can remember being extremely sad is at that point in my life. I think I was 10. My dad was working at a state hospital and was working several hours. He had like 2 or 3 jobs. He was an EMT, he worked at the state hospital, and he was also a nurse at either a nursing home or a hospital. He was always working at one or the other, or both. He was a single dad with 2 kids, completely moved to a different state, was in a lot of hardships, and my dad decided to go to a place called the Center, which is like a mental health center. So my dad decided to do family therapy for my brother, him, and I, and then he was also doing individual therapy. He did this because it's a trauma for one to go through a divorce and then to spend 9 years of your life every single day with your siblings and your mom, to half of your family being split up in over 1,000 miles away. So it's a pretty traumatic event. My dad was going through a lot of stuff, and I don't want to really talk about my dad's mental health, but just for a background, he had a lot of history of mental health issues. As far back as I have ever heard about my dad, people have told me that he has had severe mental health issues, dealing with mostly depression, and he had OCD as a child and stuff like that. But that's not really what this is about, but it's kind of important to know that, just to know my family history. Moving on, we did family therapy. I absolutely hated it. I didn't have a good time. It was very awkward. I didn't feel like I got anything out of it. I felt uncomfortable. The therapy just stopped. I don't remember why. I don't know if we got through the family therapy session. I don't know if I pretended like I was fine. I don't know. I don't really remember, but I remember being extremely sad at that point. And since my dad was a single dad, we moved back to where my dad grew up. And that was nice because he had all of his family. And my grandma had 11 kids, so she has a huge family. My grandpa passed away a long time ago, but my grandma is still here, thankfully, and she would take care of all of us cousins while all of her kids would work. Like, we would just all hang out at my grandma's house, like 7 or 8 of us, and we would just like play in the backyard. My dad would work night, or like the evening shifts, like 3 to 11, and so like sometimes I would stay the night at my grandma's house just because my dad didn't want to wake us up. That was happening, and I had a few cousins and aunts who were extremely mean to me. They would make fun of me. They would talk bad about my mom. They would call me an orphan. They would tell me that my mom didn't love me, and they were just really mean to me. And my dad worked a lot because he was a single dad and had no help. When I was about 10, I don't really know what was going on that made me want to do this, but I know that I had a hard time at that time. By the way, trigger warning, if you are mentally ill, if you're suicidal, if you self-harm, if anything like that triggers you, talking about any of that, mental health, everything, please click off here. This is not the video for you. This is just my story. But if you are mentally able to hear about a story and not to trigger you, because I know from personal experience, hearing about things or seeing things can trigger you to want to self-harm or to be suicidal again, or to have your mental health drag you down, and that's not my intention for this video. So if that's you, please click away right now, because this is about to get like very, very triggering for some people. And even for me, it's hard to talk about this, so, but it's been so long, so like I can talk about it without like being upset or like weird. And plus I was so young that like I don't think I fully understood what was going on, but now I do. So anyways, with that being said, I think that my aunt and a few of my cousins were just being brutally mean to me that day, and just with like my parents' divorce, the move, everything, I decided to take a tie, like a tie that you dress up with, a male's tie, and I tied it around my neck and I tried to hang myself in my grandma's backyard. Like, she had a clothing line and I was trying to tie it on there, and I was trying to kill myself. And I don't think I fully understood. I was 10 years old. Like, I didn't understand what I was doing, but I understood that I didn't want to feel the pain anymore, and so I wanted to take the pain away, and I had no coping skills, so that was what I resulted in doing. And my cousin found me. I wasn't hanging or anything, I was trying to, and she ran inside and told on me. And so everybody came outside and were looking for me, and I was hiding behind like a huge tire and trying to get the tie off me, but it was so tight that like I could barely breathe, and I just couldn't get it untied because it was so tight. And I started to get scared and it started to hurt. And so finally I came out. They had called my dad. My dad came home from work, went to my grandma's house. They cut the tie off me because I couldn't get it untied because it was so tight. I was crying, I was screaming and crying. I was so upset. My dad was like almost in tears. He was upset, like asking me like, why, what's wrong, are you okay, like what's wrong? And like they just, I don't think that they knew what to do in that situation because I was so young. They just didn't know how to handle it. And so like I remember one of the first things I said is like, don't put me back in therapy, don't bring me to counseling, I don't want to go to counseling, I don't want to go to counseling, I never will do it again, I just don't want to go to therapy. I don't really know what happened after that. I think that I went back inside. My dad stayed with me for like 30 minutes, and then he had to go back to work, and I was just watched by my aunt and stuff. And that was the first time that I remember being very sad. Prior to that, I remember having a lot of sadness and depression and like just bad thoughts as a kid. Like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to be in a car accident, or I wonder if people would miss me if I would die in a car accident, or if I broke my arm in a car accident. And I would have these horrible thoughts, and I didn't understand why. And a lot of my like environment was very negative and toxic, and nothing that my dad did. There was just a lot of things that was going on as a very small child. Fast forward to a few years, and my dad met somebody. He was engaged October 31st 2009. He got engaged to my dad's fiance, and I was okay with her. He kind of dated off and on throughout those, like from 9 to like, I think it was like, I was like 12, 11 whenever he met his girlfriend, and they dated for like a year or something, and then they got engaged or whatever, I don't know. But throughout those years I was very sad. I don't know, I just felt off. I felt really depressed, and I don't understand why, but I kept it all inside. I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't talk about it to anybody. And I remember at around 12 years old I started to use like sewing needles, and I would like give myself like fake tattoos, like temporary tattoos, but like I would take pan ink and dip it, like the needle in it, and like stab into my skin several times and make like a heart on me, or like I would like scratch, like carve in like things on my legs, and I would never tell anybody. Nobody ever knew. I don't know why I did those things, but I did, and it's very dangerous. I could have gotten a huge horrible infection from doing things like that. That was like my start of self-harming, and I don't think I even realized it was self-harm at the time. 6 days until my 13th birthday. A lot of people know this, but some people don't know this, so if you're new to my channel, here's a very big impactful thing that happened in my life. On November 30th, 2009, my dad committed suicide. He hung himself, and I unfortunately found his body. And it was a very traumatic thing for me, and I'm not gonna like really go into detail about like what happened that night or anything, but basically my aunt, my dad's sister, decided to take my brother and I in, and like that night, like we went to my aunt's house, and from there on out we lived with my aunt and uncle. And at the time that my dad died, my brother was in a state hospital, like in a psychiatric hospital for behavior problems. So clearly my family has a history of mental illness, and like a lot of my aunts have had OCD, anxiety, depression. My dad clearly had depression his entire life, like chronic, deep, dark depression. My mom has dealt with anxiety. I don't know what it is, but my family's just has had a history of mental illness. After my dad died is when things got bad. I started self-harming, and I started having like dark thoughts. I would have like a bottle of ibuprofen, and like I don't think ibuprofen could actually kill you, but like if you took it, I think you would just get really sick or something. But like I would just always think like I could take that bottle of ibuprofen and like it would be done. Like I wouldn't have to feel this anymore. Like I could see my dad, like I wouldn't have to deal with this. And like I was dealing with a lot of anger of like, why did you do it to my dad? And like, was it my fault? Like I did a lot of like bargaining and like, well, God, if I just in my life, like maybe you could bring him back. A lot of like dark thoughts like that. Like I was in the grieving process, and I would go back bargaining, and then I would be angry, and then I would be sad, and then I'd be okay, and then I'd be angry, and just a lot of emotions and feelings attached to this dark side of me that I already had, and it just made things a lot worse. So it was really difficult for me. I started cutting, and I hid it really well. The only person that knew was my cousin at the time, but I started dating my boyfriend, who's now my fiance, in 2010. June 29th, 2010 is when we like officially started dating without breaking up. It'll be 8 years in June. So him and I started dating, and I kind of started to tell him a little bit about like the darkness that I had within me, and I slowly started to kind of digest what had happened to me and telling him things, and he would tell me to not hurt myself and would try to help me through these. And so like I kind of I don't know, like it's hard for me to understand, to explain it, because like I don't really remember. Like it's almost like I blocked out 9 years old to like 17. That whole block of my life, I just don't really remember a lot. But he would try to help me and stuff, and I kind of just stopped telling him things, and so I would still be cutting if I would get into a fight with my aunt. And at this time my home life started getting really bad again, and I started fighting with my uncle and my aunt, and they would treat me differently than their kids. They would let their kids do whatever they wanted, and then I would get grounded all the time. And my brother was in and out of facilities for his mental health and his behavior problems. And so it was just me with my aunt, and eventually all of her kids grew up and moved out except for her son, and her son was brutal to me and would tell me I'm an orphan, and they would all tell me that I was the reason why my dad killed himself, and that I didn't belong there, and that nobody loved me. And like those things started to get to me. If you hear it so many times, then you start to believe it. And I already blamed myself for half the stuff that happened, so hearing it constantly kind of made it worse. So I get to about 14, 13, and somehow, I think it was 8th grade, so I think I was about 14, somehow someone found out that I was self-harming and told the school nurse or my school counselor. And I was super close with my school counselor. Like I would go to her all the time and just talk to her, and she was so good. But they found out. They basically would take me into the nurse's station and check my body, and whenever they first found out, I had like 3 cuts on my wrist. They saw the 3 cuts, and like I was wearing bracelets, and I'd always wear jackets. I would wear jackets to cover up the scars, but I also wore jackets because I was very self-conscious of my body. I hated my body. I thought I was fat, so I would be very self-conscious, and I would wear jackets all the time to cover up my scars and to cover up my body, because I was just so self-conscious and so insecure about everything. And yeah, they would start checking me. I don't know how I stopped cutting. At this time I started writing, and I started reading the Ellen Hopkins books like Crank, Perfect, Impulse, Glass, like all those, that series. And that really helped me, just reading stories about people's struggles and their stories and struggles that I couldn't even relate to. Like, some people were doing drugs, and some people were dealing with being raped, and some people were dealing with self-harm, suicide, just all these things. I just read those books and I could relate in some way, shape, or form, and it just made me feel less alone. And that's why I'm talking about this now, because I felt so alone, and I felt like nobody understood what I was going through, and that I would never get through it, and that I was so alone, and it didn't matter what I said or what anyone said or did. I was never gonna get out of this darkness that I was in, and everything became a chore. I just had nobody to talk to besides my family. Some of the friends I had, I just didn't feel comfortable coming to them and talking to them about these things, because I didn't think they would understand, and they would think that I'm crazy or that I'm gonna kill myself or something. And so I just kind of kept everything to myself, and I started writing poetry as a teenager. Like, I just felt like I didn't belong anywhere, and that was a hard pill to swallow. I started turning to poetry. I started getting into YouTube in 2011 is really when I like started really loving YouTube and getting into YouTube, and it was my coping mechanism, and I loved making videos. I loved watching YouTube. It just was like my safe haven for me, and it felt really good to get into that. And I started going to church camp a lot. Summers, like 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I loved church camp. I started getting close to God, and I believe that a lot of these things saved my life, and Trey is a huge part of that. And I don't think I could have gotten through it without him, because I was able to escape everything, and I was able to go to his parents' house and stay with him on the weekends and just get away from the chaos that my life had. And I was constantly in just chaos, and like my brain was constantly stimulated and just so like on edge and just waiting for something bad to happen, that I just was so negative and just expected bad things to happen. So when I could go to my fiance's house on the weekend and spend time with his family, it was nice. It was a refresher. It was a nice fresh of breath air to just feel accepted and loved and cared for. Poetry, music, songs, books, YouTube, Trey, God, all these things kind of helped me pull away from this dark place that I was in, and I was able to kind of, I don't know how I got out of it. I really think that those things that I was doing, and that was what got me out of that place. So I graduate high school in December, and I decide to get the heck out of town. I'm done with my school. High school wasn't the best for me. I did color guard my junior and senior year, and I made a lot of friends with that, had a lot of fun with that. It gave me things to do on Friday nights for like football games. It got me involved in the school. I loved doing it. So I decided to leave in December from school. I graduated a semester early, and I came to my college, and fast forward 3 years, I'm here. Besides all of that, I mean, I'm in a good space. I love my major. I love going to my classes because the people in my classes are so hilarious, and we all get along so well. I'm in a better space, but I still have my moments. I still have times where I feel that just darkness overcome me, and I just feel like I can't even shower or brush my teeth, and I get in this just trance where I just don't want to do anything, and I don't feel good about myself. I don't want to make myself look presentable, but like I just feel like sometimes I'm just scared that I'm gonna go back to that place. I'm just like waiting for that time where it's gonna hit me, and I'm gonna like fall apart, and I'm gonna be suicidal, and I'm gonna hate myself, and I'm gonna want to die again, and I'm just gonna have these horrible thoughts and feelings again, like I did as a kid all throughout my life until a few years ago, honestly. It's just like a scary feeling, and it's scary to not know the future, but I gotta keep focusing on what I'm doing now. I tried therapy twice in my life, and both times were very traumatic times in my life. One when my parents divorced and I never really got to see my mom or talk to her, and then the other time when my dad died. So like therapy is like a trauma in and of itself to even go, but I think that I'm like ready to start moving through those emotions and moving through the past and the traumas and getting over them and finally letting that chapter of my life close. Doing that takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength, and I think I'm ready for that. So yeah, if you're in that kind of a space right now, and if you're a teenager, just know that it does get better. And I know that everybody tells you that and you don't want to believe that, but coming from somebody who's been through a lot of crap, and you've probably been through more stuff than I have, I can tell you that it gets better. And it might not be till after you're an adult, until you get to move out and you're on your own, but it gets better. Like the second I moved out of my aunt's house and I was on my own, like it was just like a weight lifted off me. Like I just felt like my own person, and I felt like I could make my own decisions, and like I had a voice, and like my voice mattered. And that's why I'm so opinionated, and so like I'm very blunt and very outspoken, just because all throughout my like teen years I was just always degraded and told like I can't have an opinion, and like my opinion doesn't matter, and it just made me feel like a bad person, and like I was always wrong when I wasn't doing anything wrong. So yeah, that's kind of my story. And there's mowing in the back, so sorry. So that's like my cue to start being done, because like this is a long video anyways. But like, yeah, like if you're starting to feel that way, like don't walk, run for help. Run and get help, because like that's the best thing you can do for yourself, because sometimes you can't do it on your own, and I definitely did not do it on my own. Like Trey, God, YouTube, I'm not kidding, YouTube is like a serious big important thing to me, and I think this, I hope, makes you understand why like I love YouTube and why it's such an important thing to me, because of my past. And then books, Ellen Hopkins, movies, music, a lot of things that you can just relate to and just feel not alone. Like those things were what helped me the best. And so yeah, I hope that this video helps you in any way, or maybe you don't get anything out of it in that sense. Maybe you can understand me a little bit better and who I am and why I am the way I am. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut this video now because there's mowing in the background and it's gonna be annoying and I can't stand that noise. So yeah, I'm gonna go. So hopefully this video was good. I don't know. I said I would do like a mental health thing, so I hope this is what you were wanting. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now. So thank you so much for watching. May all your stars align, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.